Welcome! Before we get started, I want to mention that our videos show the methods that work best for our projects, our car, and our budget. And we hope our suggestions are helpful as you tailor your projects to fit your individual circumstances, and that you'll always work safely and follow all local laws and racing club regulations, and treat all of our parts and fluids as restricted to off-street use until local approval is determined. For more information, tips, and product recommendations, visit our website, billsmgraceshop.com, and check out the Vintage Auto Racing Association website, vararacing.com. Hello and welcome back. In this step, we're going to get the engine block off the workbench and onto this piece which mounts to the engine stand. Couple of options. The way we're going to do that is to go horizontally on the side like this instead of on the end as you see on some larger engines, because although we have the smallest stand that was available, the bolt spacing is still too big for this block. And the way we're going to do this on the side is with this adapter plate, which will bolt on to the engine. Oops. Well, if I turn it correctly, it's going to bolt on right here. Then this will bolt on right here, and we'll have it. One of the things I like about this setup is it's easier to get the camshaft in. You can still get to everything on this end, to the oil pump, to the end of the camshaft for the oil pump. You can even mount the flywheel and the end plate and the flywheel without taking it off the stand. The one thing we are covering up is this oil filter return spot, but we'll deal with that later when we take it off the stand. Now this particular layout I'm using with the holes lets me hit these two bolts, which are I believe these are the generator mounting bolts, and these two bolt holes, which is the oil filter return, but all the rest of this space under here is open, and so that lets me put the bolts for the engine stand through there, and they have plenty of room to fit without hitting anything on the engine block itself. And yes, I am putting these in with the lock washer on the head side instead of the nut side, but you'll see why that is in a minute. Now the other thing we have to consider is when this plate fits up here, it touches here, it touches here, it touches here, but it doesn't touch here, and it will swing back and forth, which puts a strain on the bolts, could put a strain on the bolts. And so to take care of that, we're going to add two washers on the back, which will take up that space, and we won't have a problem. We'll get a nice flush mounting without any loose wobbling once these are all tightened up. Now we put one in the generator mount. I'm putting one down here in the oil filter mount. Now this one that had the extra washers added to it, tighten it snug. Now these other ones are still loose, but you'll see we're touching on all 4 points got a nice tight fit. One other thing about mounting bolts, you always need to have them where the stress is on the head and not on the shear. You notice from the last step, the painting is all complete. Gives a nice finish to the block. Very grease and oil resistant. It's almost an epoxy-like coating. One thing I did do that you may have noticed from the videos I went back and fixed is I wasn't paying close enough attention, accidentally painted over some areas on the other pieces where gaskets are, or that are open to the crankcase, or up here open to the water pump. These should all remain unpainted, especially anything that opens to the crankcase, because you don't want flecks of paint. I'll scrape these off later. You don't want flecks of paint getting down and then getting caught up in the bearings. Okay, now we're ready to mount this piece of the engine stand on, and we have the same issue as we had with this. Is if we just put it on here, it's going to rest on these bolt heads, but it wants to rock back and forth. And the way we're going to take care of that is with these large spacer washers. We'll put those on first. Now when we bolt this down, so we've got a nice tight, we'll have a nice tight fit on these super large bolts, and no problem with this thing trying to get away. And see, this leaves all the rest of the engine open. You can even put the head on, put the plugs in. You can do 95% of the build, even put the I believe even the distributor fits back in. And then the last thing would be take it off the stand, hook up the oil fittings. This, by the way, because it's a racing engine, we're going to hook up the oil filter for purposes of taking it to the dyno, but later on we're going to hook up an external oil filter. This is the outlet from the oil pump. Normally this would have a line that runs from here down to this oil filter. We're going to have a temporary line for that. You'll see when we get to that point. And when it's permanently in the car, this will go out to an external oil filter, to a oil temperature sensor, to an oil cooler, and then come back into this opening. And that's the way the car is set up now, and that works out really well. Okay, now you can see why, hopefully you can see why I put the lock washers on the other side, because now I can cinch this up without trying to squeeze a wrench back there to catch that head. Most of these, I think, are gonna tighten down on their own. As soon as that lock washer bites in, I can tighten these up, get a nice tight fit. Okay, I'll finish tightening these, and then we'll set up the crane and get this on the stand. Okay, I believe we're ready to proceed. I've got a chain attached to the engine block. Got the crane in place. We're going to lift this off the bench. Carefully. There we go. and swing it into place. Now we'll drop it down. Right about there. A little bit more. And we're on the stand, just like that. Piece of cake. I'll take the chain off, give you an idea how convenient this is to work with. This stand comes with a handle for flipping things around, and all we have to do is pull out the pin. We can get the back of the engine, front of the engine. In one of our upcoming steps, we're going to drop the camshaft in, get to the bottom. Oops, got to scrape some of that extra paint off, and so on. We can get to every single part with ease.
And that wraps up this video. For more information, tips, and product recommendations, visit our website, billsmgrayshop.com.